Maria Washington pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway of Titan Industries, her worn sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. At 34, she had been working as a night janitor for 3 years, cleaning the offices of one of the city's most powerful corporations. The pay wasn't much, but it kept food on the table for her 8-year-old son Marcus and helped pay for his school supplies. The building felt different tonight. Earlier that day, she had overheard executives talking excitedly about a massive $5 billion government contract they were about to sign. The deal would apparently make Titan Industries the sole provider of water purification systems for low-income neighborhoods across 12 states. Maria had grown up in one of those neighborhoods herself, where clean water was often a luxury rather than a guarantee. As she emptied trash cans in the executive conference room, Maria noticed a stack of documents left carelessly on the table. Normally, she wouldn't pay attention to such things, but the words "Water Safety Report" caught her eye. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she glanced at the top page while continuing to clean around the table. What she saw made her heart skip a beat. The document contained test results showing that Titan's new water purification filters failed to remove dangerous chemicals in over 40% of cases. The report clearly stated that these systems could leave families drinking contaminated water that might cause serious health problems, especially in children. Yet the company planned to market these same faulty systems as premium grade to communities that desperately needed clean water. Maria's hands trembled as she realized what this meant. Thousands of families just like hers would be drinking poisoned water, while Titan Industries collected billions of dollars from the government. Children like her own son would be at risk, and their parents would never even know it because they trusted the company to provide safe, clean water. She thought about Marcus, who had struggled with asthma since he was little. The doctors always said pollution and poor air quality made it worse. But what if contaminated water was also part of the problem? What if other children in her old neighborhood were getting sick because companies like Titan cared more about profits than people's lives? Maria knew she had to do something. But what could a single mother working as a janitor possibly do against a company worth billions? She had no college degree, no connections, and no money for lawyers. If she spoke up, she would almost certainly lose her job. And then how would she support Marcus? The executive meeting was scheduled for tomorrow morning, and once they signed that contract, it would be too late to stop it. Standing alone in that conference room, surrounded by the evidence of corporate greed, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She carefully photographed the documents with her phone, her heart pounding as she worried someone might walk in and catch her. She had never done anything like this before, but she couldn't stand by and let innocent families suffer when she had the power to prevent it. As she finished cleaning and prepared to leave the building, Maria's mind raced with possibilities. She thought about calling the newspapers, but would they believe a janitor over a powerful corporation? She considered contacting government officials, but she didn't even know where to start. What she needed was a way to make sure the right people saw this evidence before it was too late. The security guard at the front desk nodded at her as she signed out, just like every other night. He had no idea that Maria was carrying information that could bring down one of the city's most powerful companies. She walked to her old car in the parking garage, her phone heavy in her pocket with the weight of what she had discovered. Tomorrow morning, the executives would arrive expecting to celebrate their biggest deal ever. They had no idea that a woman they probably never noticed, someone whose name they didn't even know, was about to turn their world upside down. Maria Washington, single mother and night janitor, was about to take on a $5 billion corporation, and she was determined to win. Maria barely slept that night. She sat at her kitchen table staring at the photos on her phone while Marcus slept peacefully in the next room. The evidence was clear, but she still felt overwhelmed by the enormous task ahead of her. How could she, a single mother working minimum wage, take on a company that probably spent more on lunch meetings than she made in a year? By 5 in the morning, she had made up her mind. Maria called her sister Rosa, who worked at a local community center. Rosa had connections with neighborhood activists and social workers who might know how to handle this kind of situation. When Maria explained what she had found, Rosa was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Maria, are you absolutely sure about this? These people don't play games. If you're wrong or if they find out it was you, they'll destroy your life," Rosa warned. But when Maria described the test results and what they meant for families in their community, Rosa's tone changed. "Okay, I know someone who can help. Meet me at the community center in an hour." The person Rosa brought was Janet Cooper, a retired investigative journalist who now worked with community advocacy groups. Janet had silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to look right through Maria as she examined the photos. After several minutes of careful study, Janet looked up with a grim expression. "This is worse than I thought," Janet said. "These systems aren't just faulty, they're dangerous. If this contract goes through, people will die. Children will develop cancer, kidney problems, brain damage, and Titan knows it." She paused, looking directly at Maria. "But you understand what you're risking? If you go public with this, they'll come after you with everything they have." Maria thought about Marcus still sleeping at home, trusting his mother to keep him safe. Then she thought about all the other children who would drink poisoned water if she stayed quiet. "I don't care what happens to me. I can't let them hurt innocent families." Janet smiled for the first time. "Then let's make some noise." The plan they developed was simple but risky. Janet would contact her former colleagues at the city's largest newspaper, while Maria reached out to local TV news stations. They would coordinate the release of information to happen just hours before Titan's big contract signing ceremony, giving the company no time to cover up or spin the story. Maria spent the day making phone calls, her voice shaking at first but growing stronger with each conversation. Some reporters hung up on her, dismissing her as just another disgruntled employee. But others listened, especially when she mentioned the $5 billion contract and the danger to children's health. Channel 7 News agreed to meet her that evening. Maria had never been on television before, and the thought terrified her. But when she sat across from reporter Amanda Chen and began describing what she had discovered, her fear transformed into determination. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about justice. "Let me make sure I understand," Amanda said, reviewing the documents Maria had provided. "Titan Industries knows their water filtration systems are defective, but they're planning to sell them to the government anyway?" When Maria nodded, Amanda continued, "And you discovered this while working as their janitor?" "I clean their offices every night," Maria explained. "I see things. I hear things. And when I saw those test results, I knew I couldn't stay quiet. These systems are going to communities just like where I grew up. My neighbors, my friends' children, they'll all be drinking contaminated water and never know it." Amanda leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you think will happen when this story breaks tomorrow?" Maria had thought about this question all day. "They'll probably fire me. They might try to sue me or say I stole their documents. They'll do everything they can to make me look like a liar." She paused, thinking about Marcus. But sometimes doing the right thing costs something, and the cost of staying quiet is too high. As the interview concluded, Amanda shook Maria's hand firmly. "Your story will be our lead tomorrow morning, right before their contract ceremony. Are you prepared for what comes next?" Maria nodded, though her heart was pounding. Tomorrow, her quiet life as an invisible janitor would be over. Tomorrow, she would be the woman who challenged a $5 billion corporation. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning of the contract signing, Maria woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The Channel 7 story had aired at 6 a.m., and by 7 it was trending on social media. The headline read, "Local Janitor Exposes Deadly Cover-Up in Billion-Dollar Water Contract." Maria's phone rang again. This time it was her supervisor at Titan Industries. "Maria, you need to get down here right now. Mr. Harrison wants to see you immediately." The line went dead before she could respond. She dropped Marcus off at school, giving him an extra long hug. "Mama has to handle some grown-up business today," she told him. "But whatever happens, remember that standing up for what's right is always worth it." Marcus nodded seriously, though he didn't fully understand why his mother seemed so worried. When Maria arrived at Titan Industries, the building was in chaos. News vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions at anyone entering or leaving, and security guards blocked all the main entrances. Maria had to use the employee entrance in the back, where she was immediately escorted to the top floor by 2 security officers. The executive boardroom was packed with angry-looking men in expensive suits. At the head of the table sat Richard Harrison, Titan's CEO, a tall man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. When Maria entered, the room fell silent. Every eye in the room focused on her, and she felt smaller than ever in her cleaning uniform. Ms. Washington, Harrison said, his voice dangerously quiet. You've caused quite a stir this morning. He gestured to the wall-mounted TV, which was showing footage of the news report. That's you, isn't it? Sharing confidential company documents with reporters? Maria's throat felt dry, but she managed to speak. Those documents show that your water systems don't work properly. People need to know the truth. Harrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. The truth? You're a janitor. You clean toilets and empty trash cans. What could you possibly know about water purification technology? Several executives chuckled, their laughter cruel and dismissive. I know enough to read test results, Maria replied, her voice growing stronger. I know that 40% failure rate means children will get sick. I know that you've been lying to the government about how safe these systems are. The general counsel, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Webb, leaned forward. Ms. Washington, you signed a non-disclosure agreement when you were hired. You violated that agreement and stolen confidential company property. We could have you arrested right now. Then do it, Maria said, surprising herself with her boldness. Arrest me, but that won't change what's in those documents. It won't change the fact that you're about to poison thousands of families for money. Harrison stood up, his face red with anger. You have no idea what you're talking about. Those test results were preliminary. Our systems are perfectly safe when properly installed and maintained. Then why does your own report recommend against using them in low-income areas? Maria shot back. Why does it say the filtration systems can't handle the types of contamination found in older water pipes? The room fell silent again. Several executives looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. It was clear that not everyone in the room had seen the full test reports. Harrison's voice turned threatening. Ms. Washington, you're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and I want you to know that we will be pursuing all legal remedies available to us. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. I expected that, Maria said calmly. But this isn't over. The whole city knows the truth now. Your $5 billion contract ceremony is in 2 hours, and everyone will be watching to see what you do. As security guards moved to escort her out, Maria turned back to face the room full of executives. I grew up drinking dirty water. I know what it's like to watch your neighbors get sick because nobody with power cares about poor people. You all have children too. How would you feel if someone was about to poison them for profit? The silence that followed was deafening. Some of the executives looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Others stared at her with newfound respect, even if they disagreed with her actions. As Maria was led from the building, she could hear Harrison shouting orders about damage control and emergency meetings. Outside, reporters swarmed around her, shouting questions about her allegations and what she planned to do next. Standing on the steps of Titan Industries, facing a crowd of cameras and microphones, Maria realized that her life had changed forever. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer just a janitor. She was the woman who had challenged a corporation's lies, and now the whole world was watching to see what would happen next. The Titan Industries headquarters conference center was decorated with banners and flowers for what should have been a celebration. Government officials, including the Secretary of Health and Human Services, had flown in for the contract signing ceremony. Local politicians and business leaders filled the audience, expecting to witness one of the largest infrastructure deals in the city's history. But instead of celebration, there was tension in the air. News crews lined the walls, their cameras focused on every entrance. Outside, a growing crowd of protesters had gathered, many holding signs reading, "Protect our water" and "Children over profits." Maria's story had spread rapidly through social media, and community activists from across the city had come to demand answers. Richard Harrison stood at the podium, trying to maintain his composure despite the chaos surrounding him. His prepared speech about corporate responsibility and community service seemed ridiculous now, with Maria's allegations dominating every news broadcast in the city. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison began, his voice echoing through the conference center. "Today marks a historic partnership between Titan Industries and the federal government. Our advanced water purification systems will provide clean, safe drinking water to communities that need it most." A reporter in the front row immediately raised her hand. "Mr. Harrison, how do you respond to allegations that your systems have a 40% failure rate?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "Those allegations are based on preliminary data, taken out of context by someone with no scientific training. Our systems meet or exceed all federal safety standards." Secretary of Health and Human Services Dr. Margaret Foster looked uncomfortable as she sat on the stage. She had been briefed on Maria's allegations just an hour before the ceremony, and her staff was frantically trying to verify the information. Dr. Foster had built her career on protecting public health, and the possibility that she might be signing off on dangerous systems was deeply troubling. In the audience, Maria sat in the back row surrounded by reporters and community activists who had invited her to attend. She wore her best dress, a simple blue outfit she usually reserved for church, but she held her head high with quiet dignity. Next to her sat Janet Cooper, the retired journalist who had helped her expose the truth. "The secretary looks worried," Janet whispered to Maria. "I think your story is having more impact than Harrison expected." As Harrison continued his presentation, protesters outside began chanting loudly enough to be heard inside the conference center. "No contract! No contract! Protect our families." The noise grew louder as more people joined the demonstration. Dr. Foster finally stood up and approached the microphone. "Mr. Harrison, before we proceed with this ceremony, I need to address the serious allegations that have been raised this morning. The Department of Health and Human Services has a responsibility to thoroughly investigate any claims about public safety." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. This was not part of the planned program. Harrison looked panicked. "Dr. Foster, with all due respect, these allegations come from a disgruntled employee who has no expertise in water purification technology. We can't delay a $5 billion infrastructure project based on unsubstantiated claims." "Actually," Dr. Foster replied, "we can and we will. I've reviewed the documents provided to the media this morning, and they appear to be genuine Titan Industries test results. Until we can verify the safety and effectiveness of your systems, this contract signing is postponed." The conference center fell silent. Government officials looked at each other in confusion. Business leaders in the audience began whispering urgently into their phones. The carefully orchestrated celebration had become a public relations disaster. Harrison's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. "This is outrageous. We've spent millions of dollars preparing for this contract. Our systems have been approved by every relevant regulatory agency. Then you should have no problem with an independent review," Dr. Foster replied calmly. "The American people deserve to know that their tax dollars are being spent on systems that will actually protect their health." From the back of the room, Maria watched the drama unfold with a mixture of amazement and nervousness. Just 12 hours earlier, she had been an invisible janitor. Now her actions had stopped a $5 billion deal and forced the federal government to reconsider its partnership with one of the country's largest corporations. The crowd outside cheered as news of the postponement spread. Parents who had been worried about their children's water supply felt a moment of hope that someone was finally listening to their concerns. But Maria knew this victory was only temporary. Titan Industries had enormous resources and political connections. They would fight back and they would try to destroy her credibility and her life. The real battle was just beginning. As the ceremony dissolved into chaos and government officials huddled in emergency meetings, Harrison's eyes found Maria in the crowd. The look he gave her was filled with rage and something that looked like a promise of revenge. Maria met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. She had come too far to back down now. Within hours of the postponed ceremony, Titan Industries launched a vicious campaign to destroy Maria's credibility. Their public relations team worked around the clock, feeding stories to friendly reporters about her background, her financial struggles, and her lack of formal education. "Maria Washington is clearly being manipulated by radical activists," Harrison told a primetime news show that evening. "She's a woman with serious financial problems who saw an opportunity to make money by attacking a successful company. Our lawyers have discovered that she owes thousands in medical bills for her son's treatments." The personal attack stung more than Maria had expected. Reporters began camping outside her apartment building, asking her neighbors invasive questions about her private life. Someone leaked her employment records, highlighting every late payment, every missed day of work, every sign that she might be an unreliable employee. But the attacks backfired in ways Harrison never expected. Instead of discrediting Maria, they made her more sympathetic to the public. Here was a single mother working night shifts to pay for her son's medical care, risking everything to protect other families from dangerous water systems. Community leaders who had never heard of Maria Washington before began organizing in her support. Churches took up collections to help with her legal expenses. Neighborhood groups that had been fighting for clean water for years suddenly had a hero who looked like them and understood their struggles. The most powerful response came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the country's leading experts in environmental health and a professor at the state university, had spent the weekend reviewing the leaked Titan documents. On Monday morning, she held a press conference that changed everything. "I have analyzed the test results that Ms. Washington brought to light," Dr. Chen announced to a packed room of reporters. "As a scientist with 30 years of experience in water safety research, I can confirm that these systems pose a significant risk to public health. The failure rates documented in Titan's own reports are unacceptable for any water treatment system, especially those intended for vulnerable populations." Dr. Chen's endorsement gave Maria's allegations the scientific credibility they needed. Suddenly, this wasn't just about one janitor versus a big corporation. This was about public health, environmental justice, and corporate accountability. The federal investigation moved quickly. Dr. Foster's team found irregularities in Titan's previous testing procedures and discovered that several regulatory approvals had been based on incomplete data. Congressional representatives began calling for hearings. State attorneys general opened their own investigations, but the pressure on Maria personally continued to intensify. Anonymous callers threatened her at all hours. Someone spray-painted hateful messages on her car. A fake social media account spread lies about her relationship with her son's father, trying to portray her as morally unfit. The worst moment came when Marcus came home from school crying. Some of the older kids had been teasing him, saying his mother was a troublemaker who got people fired. "Mama, why are people being mean to you?" he asked, his 8-year-old face full of confusion and worry. Maria knelt down to his level, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes, baby, when you try to help people, other people get angry because they were doing something wrong. I found out about something that could hurt families like ours, and I had to tell the truth about it." "But why do they want to hurt us?" Marcus asked. "Because they're scared," Maria explained. "They're scared that people will find out they weren't being honest. But we don't have to be scared of them, because we know we did the right thing." That evening, Maria received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was familiar but shocking. "Ms. Washington, this is Dr. Foster from the Department of Health and Human Services. I wanted to call personally to thank you for your courage." Maria was speechless for a moment. "Dr. Foster, thank you for believing me. Our investigation has confirmed your allegations," Dr. Foster continued. "Titan systems would have endangered millions of people. Because of your actions, we're able to prevent a public health catastrophe. I want you to know that the federal government takes these issues seriously, and we will ensure that you're protected from retaliation." After hanging up, Maria sat in her small apartment, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, she had been invisible. Just another poor single mother trying to make ends meet. Now she was at the center of a national controversy that was changing laws and saving lives. The phone rang again. This time it was Janet Cooper with news that would change Maria's life forever. "Maria, I just got off the phone with the MacArthur Foundation. They're considering you for a fellowship, a genius grant for ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It comes with enough money to secure your future and Marcus's education." As Maria processed this information, she realized that her decision to speak truth to power had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of countless families who would now have access to truly safe drinking water. The scared janitor who had photographed those documents in the dark conference room was gone. In her place stood a woman who had proven that one person's courage could indeed change the world. 2 months after the failed contract ceremony, Richard Harrison sat in his corner office staring at the resignation letter on his desk. The Titan Industries board had given him an ultimatum: resign quietly or face a public vote of no confidence. The company's stock price had crashed, multiple lawsuits were pending, and federal investigators had found evidence of fraud that went back several years. But Harrison wasn't ready to accept defeat. He had built Titan Industries from a small water treatment company into a billion-dollar corporation, and he wasn't about to let a janitor destroy everything he had worked for. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he had memorized but never used. "Ms. Washington," he said when Maria answered. his voice surprisingly calm. "This is Richard Harrison. I think we need to talk." Maria was shocked to hear from him directly. After weeks of legal threats and personal attacks, she hadn't expected a personal phone call. "What do you want?" "I want to meet with you, face to face, just the two of us." Harrison paused. "I think there are things we both need to understand about what's happened here." Against the advice of her lawyer and the activist groups supporting her, Maria agreed to the meeting. Something in Harrison's voice suggested this wasn't another attempt to intimidate or threaten her. They arranged to meet at a small coffee shop downtown, away from the media attention that now followed both of them everywhere. When Maria arrived, she found Harrison sitting alone at a corner table, looking older and more tired than she remembered. He stood when she approached, extending his hand in a gesture that seemed genuinely respectful. "Thank you for coming," he said as they sat down. "I know you have no reason to trust me." "You're right about that," Maria replied, but her tone was more curious than hostile. "So why are we here?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. When he finally spoke, his voice was different from the aggressive, arrogant tone she remembered from their confrontation in the boardroom. "I've been thinking about what you said that day, about children drinking dirty water, about growing up in neighborhoods where nobody with power cared about poor people." He looked up at her. "You were right. I forgot what it was like to worry about my family's basic needs." Maria studied his face, trying to determine if this was another manipulation or something genuine. "So you're admitting that your water systems were dangerous?" "Our systems weren't designed for the conditions they would have faced in older infrastructure," Harrison admitted. "We knew there would be problems, but the profit margins were so attractive that we convinced ourselves the risks were acceptable." He paused. "That was wrong. It was criminal, actually." "Then why did you try to destroy my life when I exposed the truth?" Maria asked, her voice rising slightly. Harrison winced. "Because I was angry and scared. I built this company from nothing, and I saw you as a threat to everything I had achieved. I didn't think about the families that would suffer. I only thought about my own success and reputation." They sat in silence for a moment. Maria found herself in the strange position of almost feeling sorry for the man who had tried to ruin her life. "What happens now?" "I'm resigning as CEO tomorrow," Harrison said. "The company will probably file for bankruptcy, which means thousands of employees will lose their jobs. That weighs on me too." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. "But before I go, I wanted to give you this." Maria opened the envelope and found a check for an amount that made her gasp. It was enough to pay off her debts, secure Marcus's education, and provide financial stability for years to come. "I can't take this," she said, trying to hand the check back. "It looks like you're trying to buy my silence." "I'm not," Harrison said firmly. "The truth is already out there. The investigations will continue regardless of what either of us does now. This is my attempt to do something right after doing so many things wrong." Maria looked at the check again, thinking about Marcus and all the opportunities this money could provide. But she also thought about the principle that had driven her to expose Titan's lies in the first place. "I'll take it," she said finally, "but not for me. I'm going to use this money to start a foundation that monitors water safety in low-income communities. Other families shouldn't have to depend on a janitor accidentally finding documents to keep them safe." For the first time since she had met him, Harrison smiled genuinely. "That's a better use for this money than anything I would have done with it." As they prepared to leave, Harrison had one more thing to say. "Ms. Washington, I want you to know that what you did took remarkable courage. I've spent my entire career surrounded by people who told me what I wanted to hear. You were the first person in years who told me what I needed to hear, even when it cost you everything." Walking out of the coffee shop, Maria reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. She had started as Harrison's employee, someone so invisible that he probably never knew her name. Now she was his moral superior, someone whose actions had brought down his empire and changed his understanding of right and wrong. The check in her purse would change her family's life forever, but more importantly, her courage had changed countless other lives by ensuring they would have access to safe drinking water. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one with the biggest office or the most expensive suit. Sometimes it's the person willing to tell the truth no matter what it costs. 1 year later, Maria stood before the United Nations Water Safety Conference in New York City. addressing delegates from 47 countries. The scared janitor who once cleaned offices in silence had become Maria Washington, director of the Clean Water Justice Foundation and recipient of the International Environmental Protection Award. Safe drinking water should not be a luxury determined by zip code or income level, Maria told the packed auditorium. Every child deserves to turn on a faucet without wondering if the water will make them sick. In the audience, Marcus sat in the front row, wearing his best suit and beaming with pride at his mother. Now 9 years old, he understood much more about what his mother had done and why it mattered. He had become something of a celebrity at his new private school, where teachers used his mother's story as an example of civic responsibility and moral courage. The Clean Water Justice Foundation had grown beyond anything Maria had imagined when she first accepted Harrison's check. Using both his settlement money and donations from thousands of supporters around the world, the foundation now employed 12 full-time staff members who monitored water safety in vulnerable communities across the United States. Their work had already prevented 3 potential public health disasters. In Detroit, they discovered that a contractor was using substandard pipes in low-income neighborhoods. In rural Mississippi, they found that a water treatment plant was falsifying safety reports. In Los Angeles, they exposed a company that was charging poor families premium prices for water filtration systems that didn't actually work. But Maria's proudest achievement was the legislation that had passed in response to her initial revelations. The Clean Water Accountability Act required all government water contracts to undergo independent safety verification and established severe criminal penalties for companies that knowingly provided dangerous systems. After her UN speech, Maria was approached by Dr. Sarah Chen, the environmental health expert who had validated her allegations against Titan Industries. "Maria, I have a proposal for you," Dr. Chen said. "The university is offering you a full scholarship to complete your bachelor's degree and then pursue a master's in environmental policy. We want people with your perspective and experience helping to shape the next generation of water safety professionals." The offer was tempting, but Maria had found her calling in advocacy work rather than academic study. "Thank you, Dr. Chen, but I think I can do more good in the field than in the classroom. There are too many communities that still don't have a voice in these discussions." As she prepared to return home, Maria received a call that brought her story full circle. "Ms. Washington, this is Patricia Webb, former general counsel at Titan Industries. I resigned from the company after your revelations, and I've been working with federal investigators. I wanted to let you know that our cooperation has helped secure criminal convictions against several executives who knew about the water system problems and covered them up." Maria was surprised to hear from the woman who had once threatened her with arrest. "What about Mr. Harrison?" "He's agreed to plead guilty to fraud charges in exchange for a reduced sentence," Patricia explained. "His testimony has been crucial in exposing the full scope of the company's misconduct. I think your influence on him was more significant than you realize." That evening, as Maria tucked Marcus into bed in their new apartment, he asked her the question that had become their nightly ritual. "Mama, tell me again about the night you took those pictures." "I was scared," Maria began, as she always did. "I was just a janitor, and they were powerful people with lots of money. But I knew that if I didn't speak up, children just like you would get hurt." "And that's when you became brave?" Marcus asked. "No, baby," Maria corrected gently. "I was always brave. I just didn't know it yet. Every single mother working multiple jobs to take care of her children is brave. Every person who gets up every day and tries to make the world a little bit better is brave. I just had to find a way to use my bravery to help other people." Looking back on everything that had happened, Maria sometimes wondered what would have occurred if she had simply ignored those documents and continued cleaning offices in silence. Thousands of families would be drinking contaminated water. Children would be getting sick. Companies would continue prioritizing profits over human lives, but she hadn't stayed silent. Despite having everything to lose and very little power, she had found the courage to challenge a system that was fundamentally unjust. Her actions had proved that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they refused to accept that things had to stay the way they were. The girl who had grown up drinking dirty water had become the woman who ensured that other children wouldn't have to face the same dangers. As she turned off Marcus's bedroom light and walked to her own room, Maria's phone buzzed with a text message from her sister Rosa. Saw you on the news tonight. Mama would have been so proud. Their mother had died 3 years earlier, never knowing that her daughter would one day address world leaders about water safety. Maria smiled, thinking about how much her life had changed since that frightening night in the Titan Industries conference room. She had lost her invisible job as a janitor, but she had found her voice as an advocate. She had faced threats and attacks, but she had also discovered a community of people who shared her values and supported her mission. Most importantly, she had taught Marcus that one person's courage could indeed change the world. Not because that person was wealthy or powerful or famous, but because they were willing to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult and dangerous. The next morning brought news that made Maria's victory complete. The Department of Justice announced that the new federal water safety contracts would include provisions requiring community input and independent oversight. Local residents would have the right to review safety data and challenge any systems that didn't meet their needs. "This is the Maria Washington provision," the Attorney General explained to reporters. "We're ensuring that the people most affected by these decisions have a voice in the process." Maria had gone from being a name that nobody knew to being a provision in federal law. More than that, she had transformed from someone who cleaned up after powerful people to someone who held them accountable for their actions. Years later, when young activists would ask her for advice about taking on seemingly impossible fights, Maria would tell them about the night she found those documents. "I was terrified," she would always say, "but I was more afraid of staying quiet than I was of speaking up." When you know something is wrong and you have the power to expose it, silence becomes complicity. The woman who had once been invisible had become impossible to ignore. The janitor who had emptied trash cans filled with corporate secrets had become the person who ensured those secrets could never again be used to harm innocent families. Maria Washington had proven that heroes don't always wear capes or hold positions of authority. Sometimes they wear cleaning uniforms and work night shifts and struggle to pay their bills. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one who has the courage to tell the truth, regardless of the consequences. And sometimes, just sometimes, that courage is enough to stop a $5 billion lie and change the world forever.